this is a meeting of thinkers, but maybe this morning will be a meeting of doers. Each one of us in a university, and I met a wonderful group of women yesterday. I was very impressed with their knowledge, with their response, and so on. I met yesterday kids in 2 schools, etc., etc. There'll be more meetings today. You have a Human Rights Museum coming up. I made with Lloyd Axworthy that I met years ago when he was foreign minister. I say that all to you because I think it's my last speech today, correct? I will not speak anymore. No, except for a group of young people. I was basically invited here to speak to you about human rights cities. Before we do that, each one of you, you got this page called 30 Points of Dignity. I'm going to do something with you that you haven't done, I'm sure, in many, many years. We are all going to read it out loud with a strong voice, okay? I'll just say Article 1 and you'll read it, Article 2 and you'll read it. Is anybody doesn't have a copy of the 30 Points of Dignity? Let me tell you what you are reading. I'm sure you're all familiar, at least with the name, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was headed by Eleanor Roosevelt. I think if it was headed by a man, it would have been more known around the world. This is the world we live in. But she put together a group of 80 people from around the world that wrote that. They wrote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a little booklet. What we did, just to really communicate and people not be overwhelmed by more words, we took that, a professor of Harvard University, and put it into 30 points. We call it, you know who gave the name 30 Points of Dignity? A group of development students at Columbia University. Just a few weeks ago, we were with them and they call it 30 Points of Dignity. So we just adapted it, because we are not only learners, we are also learnees. Okay? So let's start. But before that, I want 1 or 2 very brave people to get up and define dignity for us. Get up so everybody could hear you.
I'm going to try.
Please.
And you notice I use the word try?
Not long, just define it in...
Self-respect that is shown to others and yourself.
Beautiful. Anybody else? Anything you say is okay.
Equality of understanding and acceptance amongst all human beings.
Wonderful. Yes.
Accepting differences and commonalities.
I love it.
Loving your neighbor.
Wonderful. It's all right. One of the nicest thing I got from a young 14-year-old woman who said to me, not to be ashamed of who I am. And the idea of dignity is we all have it and nobody can take it away from us. Dignity is inalienable, it's in us, and nobody can give it to us and nobody can take it away from us. And I've had a wonderful man, Abdullahi Naim, from Sudan, who have taught me something wonderful. He said, the only universal thing in the world is dignity. He said, you go to any village, you go to any place in the world, you ask them to give you a little memory, some lullaby, some song, some story they heard from the grandparents. And if you are, and each one of you can do it, you can identify the yearning to fulfill our dignity. And once you do that, you go into that. So this is what we are doing now. I'll say Article 1, but everybody in tandem, a big choir, okay? Article 1.
All human beings are born free and equal.
Article 2.
Everyone is entitled to the same human rights without discrimination of any kind.
Article 3. Article 4. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Article 5. No one shall be subjected to torture or cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 6. Everyone has a right to have law and right to equal protection of the law. Article 7. Everyone is equal before the law and has the human right to equal protection of the law. Article 8. Article 9. No one shall be arrested, detained, or exiled arbitrarily. Article 10. Everyone has the human right to a fair trial. Article 11. Everyone has the human right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. 12. Everyone has the human right to privacy and family life. 13. 14. Everyone has the human right to seek asylum from persecution. 15. Everyone has the human right to nationality. 16. All adults have the human right to marry and found a family. Women and men have equal human rights to marry within their marriage and as institutions. Article 17. Everyone has the human right to own property. Article 18. Article 19. Everyone has the human right to freedom of opinion and expression. 20. Everyone has the human right to peaceful assembly and association. 21. Everyone has the human right to take part in government of one's country directly or through favor of their and access to public service. 22. Social security and rehabilitation of economic, social, and cultural rights and inevitable equality. 23. Everyone has the equal right to work, to just conditions of work, to protection against unemployment, to equal pay for equal work, to sufficient pay to ensure dignified existence for oneself and one's family, and the human right to join a trade union. 24. Everyone has the human right to rest and leisure. 25. Everyone has the human right to spend a living adequate for health and well-being, including food, clothing, housing, medical care, and necessary social services. 26. Everyone has the human right to education, including free and compulsory elementary education and human rights education. 27. Everyone has the human right to participate freely in cultural life and share in scientific progress, as well as protection of their artistic, literary, and scientific education. 28. Everyone is entitled to a social and international order in which these rights can be realized fully. 29. Everyone has duties to the community. Article 30. And now repeat after me. No one human right can violate another. Now I'm going to surprise you. I would ask you to pair wherever you sit and tell one another, you have 5 minutes, when is the first time that your human rights was violated? And when is the first time that your human right was realized? And I'll ask some of you who will have the courage to get up and speak about it. Because the idea is to look at human rights not as a litany of violation, but as a strategy for development, personal and societal. Who are the people who want really to give us understanding? Because human rights is about us, okay? And human rights is accepting the dignity of the other as our own. And this is what we try to do here. Who is comfortable in getting up and saying part of the discussion that you had? Raise your hand. You?
Yeah, the only thing that she said was a great idea. All over our world, people are trading their own human rights and the human rights of others for money, materialism, power, and all the rest of it. And there are people living in this town, right here in Winnipeg, who don't have many, like we're talking about these 30, there are probably people in this town who are living without 24 of these human rights.
And what is the realization? I don't want to just look at human rights the way Amnesty looks at it. I wanted to look at human rights as development people look at it. Anybody spoke of realization? When did you realize your human rights first time? Speak out loud.
Okay, for when did I realize human rights? I suppose it's with realizing different human rights at different points. Like, I found 29, everyone has their duties to their community. I found that I realized that more recently than, let's say, my right to a fair trial or freedom of opinion and life and things. So it takes different points.
Yeah.
And for both of us, we had two childhood experiences. Mine was, I think it was grade 4, and we were laying out for the bus, and there was a boy who was standing in front of me, and he had a mental disability, so the kid was shooting at him. And there was a girl standing behind me who swore at him and called him mean. And so the boy thought that it was me who said that. And so I was taken to the head teacher, and it was this corporate punishment, so I was like beaten on my hand. And I tried to explain that it wasn't me, but no one would listen. So I guess I got beaten with her, and
Okay.
I tried making her saying that for her it was sometime in elementary school, yeah. And some older boys locked her in a washroom, and we found it interesting that those were both early childhood.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes.
I have to say, my first experience to be at home is when I was being disciplined because my mother.
Speak out loud so people can hear you over there. I'm sorry, we should have had a microphone.
When I
Yeah.
was at home, because when my mother disciplined, my mother was a disciplinarian. And it was really bad. She got away with the school or strap. And that's what I got. And I never thought anything of it. And it was when I became an adult, when I was studying at the university, when I realized that what was wrong. You know?
Wonderful.
And yet, when I was in grade 5, okay, one of the that teacher in that grade hit one of the students across the chest with a ruler and a battery where he was wrong. That was wrong. And I went home and complained about that to my mother. You know, it was okay for my mom to strap me, but it was not okay for somebody else to go hit somebody else as a kid with a ruler. It was a yardstick way back then. And that's when I realized. But for me, it was when I was an adult studying at the university and I realized my rights had been wronged.
Thank you very much. I won't ask more. If we have time, we can go back to it. But this exercise is really the way. You want to say something? Yes. But not much. Just short because. No, forgive me. Please forgive me, but they've limited my time, and I'd like to share with you something that will enable you to understand. I'm sure you do the exercise we've just done.
My human rights recognition is in the early 1900s, the Ukrainian people were here in Canada, worked, had farms, and started a life. And at the time during the Austrian War in Europe, these people were interred, imprisoned, shackled, and put into an area. From that point of time, no one has recognized their violation of human rights. The violation of human rights when people come to this country and are called DPs, displaced people, all these things. We had to go through this. A lot of the people, the immigrants that came to this Canada, worked very hard to build this country. But in the meantime, they had to change their names in order to get a job. Their nationality couldn't be recognized. Their language wasn't allowed because if they spoke another language, they were condemned for it and not hired, and they had to feed
Yeah.
their families. My recognition is you coming here, teaching us about this so we can extend this all over the country to all the other.
I'm not teaching, I'm learning.
We're learning together.
Okay, thank you. I will have to continue because my time is limited, but and what I want to happen after and all of you have centered on it, out of this group here, we hope to create, Bob and I hope to create a group that will get together to develop your city to become a human rights city. And I'll give you, and we gave you a page of what human rights cities are, but I'd like to take you through it. But it's very important, the word power was mentioned here. We must understand that unfortunately, the thing which I've said it, some of you have heard it before from me, there are 3 words that we live by which are spelled differently but they mean the same. It's power, it's fear, and it's greed. They all feed into one another. When we are young, with our families, with our friends, when we are older, these all feed into one another. And they feed into a horizontal, into a vertical life. Power is verticality. Power is masculinity. Power is patriarchy. And in my view, after visiting 60 countries and talking to many people, the problem and the most important issue that we have in the world, which undermines all human rights, is patriarchy. Patriarchy does not point fingers at man. Patriarchy is a system that we all live with. From a young age, women know that they have to listen to men. From young age, men have to know that they need to have an erection, which is very difficult, physically and metaphorically. Men need power, which I call the erection syndrome, which is power, fear, which leads to greed. If I'm strong, if I have a lot of money, and so on and so forth, I will be able to have the power. And it just eats one another all the time. And all that falling together in the other P, which is called politics. Okay? Now, what we need to do is to take this vertical on which we live on, and look at the vertical. You know, we live in a world of sport. When you're on the vertical, somebody's on top of you, somebody's under you. And the sky is the limit. Who can give the sky the limit? Very few. You know, maybe Gandhi was able to do it. Buddha was able to do it. They were very patriarchal anyway. So the question is, how do we take that vertical and move it to the horizontal? This is how we take the vertical and move it to the horizontal. The horizontal is where human rights can live. The horizontal here where we have 2 very important things: choices and equality. Equality does not mean sameness. Equality means equal in dignity. Equality means I can choose to go from here to there as a full human being, regardless if I'm a man or a woman, but without stepping on anybody. Sometimes asking for help because I can't walk, sometimes resting, but all the time knowing that I'm one of many. I like to speak of human rights as the banks of the river in which life flows freely. Happen to have been a water engineer in my youth. Look at the river. The river has billions and billions of drops that flow, and they're the banks of the river. Human rights are the banks of the river, and the water can flow. But when you take out of this river one drop, just one drop, It goes away. But when you put in this river one drop, this river, I can tell you, as an engineer, flows faster. Very small, but faster. So each one of us has value, but our value is in community, in dignity with others. That's our value. Dignity, some people speak of dignity in the spirituality way. You can go in the desert, speak to your gods, speak to the moon, to the sun, to the sand. This is your own life. I don't speak about that. Dignity is what's happening in this room. Dignity is the way you listen, you write down, and maybe you share it with others. I hope so. So developing a human rights city is really looking at the power structures and looking at the violations that happen in the city vis-a-vis the realization. And human rights city stands on 4 points. Laws, which you have in Canada. Canada ratified all the human rights convention and covenants. Then you have, so laws are usually good, even though I don't like the idea of what you call here rights. I never speak about rights, only about human rights, because rights are only laws. Rights are vertical. They can be taken and given. Human rights are horizontal and they are inalienable. And most important about human rights, think about it. All these 30 points are interconnected and interrelated. We all said at the end, nobody can take it away from us. And no one human right can violate another. So, what we do is we start thinking of what in our, so this is the second point is excuse me, I just went back. One is laws, the other one is policies. You have very good laws, but policies have to reflect these laws. And very often, policies are reflected in all kinds of political machinations. The third one is resources. When they developed the human rights covenants, they said political and civil are very easy. The government just to take it, doesn't cost the government any money. It's freedom of speech, freedom to organize, etc., etc. All the first 20 points you read. This doesn't cost the government any money, and they can say it. And then society has to live with it. And we have to see that the institutions really abide by it. But economic, social, and cultural cost the government money. Okay? And this is why in the economic, social, and cultural covenant, they speak of progressive realization, because it needs budgets. So what we are saying, we want in our city, other than political and civil, we also want economic, social, cultural. We want everybody to have access to the 5 basic needs. People now call it a welfare society. It's food, education, housing, health, and work at livable wages. Okay? And these have to be progressively realized. So when you look at your city, you ask the communities to give you their wishes. How do we do that? First of all, we pull together, and in every community, whether it was in Kati, Mali, 45,000 people, or in Rosario, Argentina, 1 million people, we always identify 32 groups. 32 groups. Always. It's amazing. Meaning there are 32 issues that evolved, that there are special people who pick up to work on that. We bring them all together. I don't mean I, because I never do any work in a community. The community must do it by itself. I may come to facilitate, but this is all I do. And then these people have to go to a very, very, very deep understanding and owning human rights. Because the purpose of our work is for all people to learn, to know, to own, to plan and act, guided by the human rights framework. It's not a law, it's a system which we call a way of life. So this is what this committee must go through. But because we can't stand in the street corner, a soap opera, the cities are too big, and the cities, by the way, is a microcosm of a state. So we ask each one of these 32 people, or as many as you can put together, to go back to their work and learn, and this is really, we have a lot of ways and means. I don't like to call it pedagogy, I like to call it ways and means. A lot of ways to integrate human rights in your work. Whether you work with youth, with women, with disabled people, with people of color, with indigenous people, you integrate it into their work. Really, it's so simple. Example, in Thiès, Senegal, young people learned that education is a human right. And they said, oh, how wonderful. We don't speak, first of all, education is a right, it's a human right. So we can connect it to other human rights. He said, but my next door neighbor is my age and doesn't go to school. If you tell us that human rights belong to all, why doesn't this friend of mine go to school? He was told when he was born, he was not registered. There's more than 50 million such kids in Africa today. He wasn't registered. And if he or she were not registered, they don't exist. If they don't exist, they can't go to school. So the kid said, that's all? Nobody told him that. Thiès has 250,000 people. Just give you an example for other things you could do here. It has 250,000 people in 49 neighborhoods. It's more like a big village, okay? And they collected, made small calls of people, they were the ages of 12 and 16, and they went from house to house to find out if there was a child who wasn't registered. And in 3 years, they registered 4,612 children. Then, as they were going to register them, they found out there aren't enough schools. So they lobbied with the mayor to build more homes in the schools. It was an amazing thing. And the thing was that the whole community understood, we have human rights, this is one of them. Then the kids, had to do something. They finished, it was 3 years. Excuse me. And they said, our city will never be healthy. There's so much dirt in the streets. There's no garbage collection. So they went to the mayor and said the following. We, all the teams, are now going to collect all the garbage to empty lots. It's the one time we're going to do it. But we insist that from now on, garbage will be collected 3 times a week. And they succeeded. So all of a sudden, they said, we are human rights beings. We are young people. We want a human rights future. And it was amazing. A woman in the city, they are all Muslims. The woman in the city lived, she was an older woman, lived with her parents, never got married. According to Islam, it's the man who inherits when parents die. And she lived in a house with her parents all her life. And when she died, the brothers, very nice brothers, came and said, out, this is our house. And the community said no. They called together a discussion and the woman got her house. It's amazing. In Mali, in Kati, they got together and we were there for 2 weeks, really doing very heavy work. And then they elected a woman to run the group, the 32 groups, the 32 people. And the religious people said, no woman runs us. And the woman said yes. And they went into negotiation. A teacher became the runner of the group. And she had a lovely idea. They had a radio and they had microphones, and for weeks and weeks and weeks, they went around and asked people what we asked here today. And it was broadcast, and the discussion in the community continued. As a matter of fact, they brought the people of Kati made Timbuktu. You all heard about Timbuktu recently. It's not a mythical city, it really exists. Became a human rights city. I'm telling that to you because when you work, the group that will work, the one who raised their hands, I hope more will join you, you have to look to, as the community learns through ways and means that you find out how they learn that human right belongs to them, they start developing a map, a city map, that has a list of violation, but a list of realization. One never goes without the other. Because if you only look at violation, you're like that. If you look at your realization, you're like that. It's hope and expectations, okay? And each one of us is capable of it. So what you have, the people in the community start telling you, hey, not here, but in Ghana, sewage running is in the street. We have to take care of that. Oh, in a better place, a hospital is coming up in our neighborhood. It has 400 beds, but it needs 600 beds. So on the side of the realization goes, oh, in our community we have the realization of human rights. But on the map, we need money for another 200 beds. Now you must know, and maybe you do, that in every city has a social budget. And that social budget is landed out by the voted people, by the mayor and so on. And if you work with children and you know the mayor, you can get money for that, and somebody who doesn't know the mayor doesn't get. This committee says no. After you create a map, you say, oh, we need $10 million for all those things in the city to overcome the violation for realization. Oh my God, we have only 5. First of all, the committee have to decide the priorities. Oh, first of all, we have to take care of disabled people. First or second. Oh, this priority is decided by the group and not by special interests. Okay, that's very important. So community to know that too. And then if you don't have money, I want to tell you that in a very poor city in Senegal, they collected safas. They collected 1, 2 safas and filled up the budget. It's so empowering. If you have a need here in the community that you need $10 million for, but you have only 5, you say, you know, everybody, you young kids, go out, collect $1 from everybody. $1 from everybody is a lot of money. You know that. And the thing is that the participation is very important. What we want to do in the action that we take is for people to participate as equals in the decision that they make their lives. By helping to make the map, that's the first step of participation. But this map has to be created with this in mind. I may want to do something, but wait a minute. If I do that, it may violate somebody else's human rights. So this human right is an ongoing dialogue. You know, this piece is only a beginning of a dialogue. Now, it is very important also that you know that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights created what's called conventions. Let me tell you the difference between covenant and conventions. It's very important. You know, the biblical idea when Abraham comes into the land of Israel, he wants to thank God and he's going to sacrifice his son. You heard it last night. And God said, excuse me, I personally don't believe in God, I believe it's moral authority. But whatever we want to call it, it's good enough. No, you don't sacrifice people. Life is sanctified. It's all about the sanctity of life. And a ram shows up, and Abraham gives thanks to God with a ram. As I said to you yesterday, you animal lovers don't get hurt. But at that time, to sacrifice a lamb was better than sacrificing a human being. I mean, vice versa. So, why don't you smile? I said to everybody, when you smile, you open the sphincters. Okay? I'm just sharing with you what I would like you all to, what all of you know. But I'd like to encourage you with the stories I'm telling you. So, then Abraham makes a covenant with God. In Hebrew, we call it Brit. A covenant with God. When they created the all norms and standards, the first two are called covenants. By the way, again, that you know, they wanted to call one of them, it's political, civil, economic, social, and cultural, but the Soviet bloc said, no, we are only interested in political, in economic, social, cultural. And the Western bloc said, we are not interested in that. Like the Americans said, the pursuit of happiness, okay? This is socialism, this is capitalism, nada, okay? So, they decide we'll have two covenants. It's okay. Why should we go into? But these two covenants today, during the years, created many what's called conventions. Meaning, it all has the ideas of the covenants, it all has the ideas of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it deals with the following. One is about discrimination. Because many people said, when you bring this to a country, it's only about the wealthier, it's only about the powerful, it's only about men. It still goes that way. So they created the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination. And then they say, wait a minute, patriarchy is so all over the place. So let's create the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against women. Okay? And then the other one, there are many others, but the other one is about children. Because they said, listen, children are full human beings. I don't like very much the convention when you look at it, because it has a little charity into it. It doesn't really enable the child to be a full human being. It's true that the child needs more help when he or she are young, but it's very strong. And UNICEF is making it better and better now. So we have 5 of them which should lead the city, and by the way, Canada ratified all of them. This convention and covenant have value only when the government ratifies them. Many governments around the world, 150 countries around the world, ratified every... Hello, thank you for coming. Hello. Every 150 countries ratified it, and all countries ratified at least 2. Like the United States didn't ratify the Convention on Women, only on racism. Okay, so it is a problem. But and in the United States you can't even bring. In this country you can. But in the United States, you can't even bring a case to court because the Constitution is what it is, and this is just something some people know. So the human rights cities which are in the United States are more human rights in the cities than human rights city, but I'll talk about it in a minute. So the third part of the 4 parts of what a human rights city is the most important part because it involves the community. To start thinking what I tried here on a more personal level, what are the violations in my community and what is their realization? Because if we only look at violation, we undermine our cause. If we only look at violation, we undermine hope and expectations. And we become demanding. And if we only look at violation, and this is very important, we cannot move charity to dignity. Think about it for a minute. For me, human right is the absolute truth. But you know in what way? There is a wonderful philosopher, Emmanuel Levinas, who said, if one person was missing from the world, this one drop that we put in the river, the absolute truth would be different. This is the most contradictory philosophical statement ever said. If one person was missing from the world, the absolute truth would be different. But the absolute truth lies in an ongoing, exchanging and changing. And I hang myself on tall trees of Levinas and I say, if one person was missing from the world, you and white